Welcome to lecture 4.5, sorry. And this lecture outlines the assessment of motor skills and why it's important to be able to assess and understand a child's proficiency when completing the skills. We'll talk about why we need to test motor skills, the types of measures that are commonly used. Specifically, we'll be talking about the TGMD2, which is a test. We will then discuss observation plans, which we've discussed in our previous lectures as well. So we need to test motor skills in order to examine the developmental level of, excuse me guys. So we need to test the motor skills in order to examine the developmental level or skill of the child. This allows us to test if there are any deficiencies or delays. The motor skills tests also have implications for other aspects of health and physical activity, as based on these tests, we can draw conclusions and comparisons to other variables. Specifically, research has shown relationships between poor motor skill performance and reduced levels of physical activity, increased rates of obesity, and decreased perceived competence, which is how well a child thinks they can perform a task. So there are a few categories used for skills assessments, and they are gross motor skills, fine motor skills, and skills that are measured along a continuum. The gross motor skills measure the locomotor skills that people use when transporting themselves by running or walking from point A to point B. They also measure object control skills, where they need to project an object from one place to another. These include throwing a ball, kicking, striking, or other ballistic skills. There are also measures of fine motor skills, where the child is asked to pick up small objects, write a sentence, or perform other tasks that involve manual manipulation. The skills are measured along a continuum, as there are different levels of proficiency that a child can display. So there are process-oriented scores and product measures. The process-oriented are qualitative analysis and assess the absence or presence of movement components similar to the stages of running and walking we discussed in the previous lecture. The product-oriented measures are quantitative and assess the outcome of a performed skill. These assessments will have a child throw a ball, for example, and measure how far they threw it, rather than measure the stages that are going on in terms of arm movement or leg movement. Terms of examples of each. Product scores include throwing velocity, jumping height, running speed, and hopping distance. The process assessments would be whether or not there's a follow-through on the tennis forehand and the location of the arms during running. Another two things we need to take into account when choosing an assessment are the reliability and validity of the test. Reliability is determined by repeatability and generalizability. For example, if this is a weighing scale we're talking about, if the scale is reliable, weighing a 5-pound dumbbell, the scale will repeatedly read 5 pounds when we place the same dumbbell on there, and will repeatedly weigh 10 pounds when we place a 10-pound dumbbell on there. In terms of validity, if we have a valid scale, we're measuring what we say we're measuring, and we need to know how good the measure that we're using is in order to answer the question that we're looking for. One thing to keep in mind is that just because a test is reliable does not mean that it is a valid test. Some important considerations to take into account when doing the testing are that we need to provide accurate, motivating, and thorough directions. We need to provide necessary encouragement and incentive so that children perform at the maximal effort. The maximal effort is required in order to assess the correct developmental stage. We also need to try our best to avoid situations that can be embarrassing for the children. We need to ensure that we practice or simulate unique items. We also need to make sure that we create a non-threatening environment so the child feels comfortable. So the primary test used to assess motor skills is the Test of Gross Motor Development, or the TGMD2. The test is a process-oriented measure that measures the quality of the motor skills. There are 6 locomotor and 6 object control skills involved. The test is criterion-based and can be scored either live or from a recorded video. These pictures are from the test, and these are some actual measures that are being taken. Like for an overhand throw, we're looking for, is wind-up initiated? Is there a follow-through? For an underhand roll, we're looking at different components, and you will give the child an overall score based on how they perform. There are other ways to measure motor skills, and these are lined in the textbook, and we've gone over some of them in our previous lectures as well. This is the observational plan for running located in your book, and it gives us a detailed set of criterion that will help us determine which stage the arms and legs are. Here's a similar plan for jumping horizontally as outlined in your text. And this next two slides go over the progression of hopping. Again, go over these on your own because they're just in your book. This one as well. So let's quickly take a minute and talk about the running assignment that we have. You need to find 3 individuals, preferably of different ages, and observe their runs at least 2 times. Follow the observation plans and use the checklist on D2L. You can practice your assessments by using the practice videos on D2L in order to do this, and I would really recommend doing that so you are able to very comfortably assess the runners when you are doing the assignment. Have a good day, and feel free to email me with any questions regarding this module.